This is Ed Robinson. In Excel VBA we have the range object, and so we'll be looking now at its properties and methods. We've already seen a few of those, but let's investigate them further. I've just placed some borders around this particular region B2 to D4, and I'm going to make some code just to show that things are working, and I'm going to select that particular, as you can see I've selected that particular, I'll just do it again, that selects that particular range. What I can do now is to take a region within that range. For example, I can use the columns, and what will that do? Well, let's find out. It selects the second column of that particular range, so it's relative to that range. And indeed I can just select the second row using that notation. Selects the second row. Let me place a bit of data in that particular range. And we'll try out some code to work with that range. We'll make the font bold, and we'll make it blue, that is to say column 1. Using this code, you can see that works on column 1 of that particular range. Let's see what happens when it makes them blue and bold. So you can see that we're referring to columns 1 of that particular range thus, and then we're following it up with a font object, making the color index, and making that blue, and the font object we're giving the bold property equal to true. Well, we look at that. I say that's a font object, but it's not quite. I'll come back to that. But for the moment, just think of all those as objects, and we've got a hierarchy of objects. And we could say that this is a range object here, and a font object, and so on. So it's a hierarchy ending off with the properties, and then you're giving them a value. Starting with a set of values, I could actually place a formula in here, and indeed make it bold. And this is the code for it. We have rows 3, which is row 3, which I've highlighted here, of that particular column, and we've taken the formula properties. So once again, we've taken the range object, followed by another range object. It's not actually, but we'll come back to that. And then the property, and then a property here, and then giving it values. And notice I've put a formula in here. Be very careful you don't put another space in here. It just doesn't work. It will cause an error. But let's see what happens when we run that. It simply puts all those formulas, and you can see them up here in the formula bar, and it's made them bold as well. Incidentally, you might come along this you might see this strange notation, which is the with notation, with and end with. Let me see how that works. I might as well just show you that now while I think of it. So what we'll do, we'll take this range object here and cut it from there, and then put here, and we'll use with here, and then paste that in here, and then cut it from here as well. You notice I'm missing I've left the full stop there to make sure that's okay. And don't forget, we need to end off with an end with. I'll just change the code so that I'll make it false, so that you'll probably know. Hope we know it's working. So that should give us a make them unbold. So if I click the button and run the code, indeed it does make them unbold, so the code is working. But just notice the strange notation, this with and end with. It's pretty useless, really. It's really to be seen when you use the macro recorder. It records a lot of with and end with for some strange reason. I guess it harks back to the days when cutting and pasting wasn't so easy, and it just was meant to save us a bit of typing. It's not a construction, a programming construction at all. It's pretty, all it is, it's a sort of cosmetic way of hopefully saving you a bit of time, but as I say, with cutting and pasting, it's really not worth the effort. Let's try an example, a practical example maybe. We want to find the maximum value, which I think is 65 from that. We need first of all to define our range and then iterate through that range of values. So I guess we should really refer to this range. So what I'll do is I'll dim a range variable, and then I will set that range variable equal to that particular range. Well, I think what I'll do is just make sure things are working. So I'll just say RNG select and make sure I've got the right range, which I have. I need some strategy for finding the maximum value. What I'll eventually need to do is, I think I'll iterate through them and find, and so what I'll do, I'll just declare a variable mx, which is our maximum so far. Then what I'll do is set the maximum so far as being the first cell. Cells 1 within that particular range, you see. So this is our range RNG, and we're referring to cells 1, which is the first value in the cell. Well, maybe we could just give that a try, and if we make a breakpoint and run it down to here, mx is empty at the moment, but if I press F8, isn't that nice? It shows you the value of the first cell is 34. So I'm going to iterate through these. I'll take off my breakpoint and stop my program. I know I'm going to iterate through these things, so I think I need a counter variable. I'll use I as an integer. So I'm going to make a loop. So what I'll do is go for starting here in the second one, because I know this one's 34, and I'm going to compare each one of those. So let me try my loop for I equals, so I'll do I equals 2. I'll start for the next cell down in the actual 50. For I equals for I equals 2 RNG. Let's see if I've got it. Yes, I've got a count property here. Isn't it? I think that there you are. If I equals 1, 2, and whenever I have a for loop, the first thing I do is put in my next, because I invariably forget my next statement. So I'm going to need an if statement in here if I find something that's bigger. So if RNG cells I, which is I is relative to this particular range, so it's cells 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 relative to that particular range. So that's my range, and this is the cells relative to that. So cells I full stop value, which we could leave the value out because it's a default property, but if it's greater than mx, then we've got to decide to do something. Well, before I do anything, I'm going to have an end if, and there's breaking my own rule there. If mx, I always try to tell students, always make if and then on the same line. And I always like to indent my if statement as well, so I'll highlight that and just press the tab key. So what are we going to do if the cell that we find is bigger than our mx? Then we have to put mx equal to that current value. How do we do that? Like there. So mx will now be equal to the current value. So we can try, well, before we do that, we really need to message box out. So after the loop is over, we really need to say what that maximum value is. Like this. Maximum value is such and such. So if we run our code, there it is, so that indeed the maximum value is 65. This time I'm going to try and colour anything which is 50 or more blue. And really, for no good reason, I'm going to use a for each loop rather than a for I for an integer. So I'm going to get rid of this stuff here, and I'm going to say for each CL. Now it could be any name CL in, but I haven't declared it yet. So I'm going to say for each CL in RNG. So really, I need here to define my CL. It won't be an integer this time. It's going to be a range variable. So for each CL in range. And we must therefore have next CL. It was just a different way of doing it, really. It can be more convenient doing it using the for each. So rather than this here, we're going to have if CL, the range object. So you see, the range object is each individual cell as we go iterating through in this particular range. So this is what we call a collection of cells, or a collection of ranges even, because a cell is a range. And I've just defined it using this variable. It could be anything you like, x or whatever you like to call it, but for full stop, you can see that you get IntelliSense there with value coming down, so we know we're on the right track. If it's greater than or equal to, we decided, if it's greater than or equal to 50, then what are we going to do? We're going to make it blue, right? So what we need to do is to say then CL full stop. Now font color font, sorry, no full stop, that's why it's not showing up. Font full stop, color index, there it is there. I can double click on color index. Notice it's American spelling with OR. That's quite a trap sometimes. Is equal to, now I happen to know that blue is 5, so that should, let's see if that works. So I could just click my button to run the code, and you can see that anything which is over 50 is coloured, these cells here obviously, is coloured blue. What I'd like to do now is to transfer some cells from one place to another. So if I have this, I've just put a border around so you can see what's going on here. So what I want to do is to transfer those cells to here. Now the code to do that is quite extraordinary really. This is it here. I'll just get rid of all of that, and it says here that, remember, it works from right to left. So this range A2 B3 is this range here is equal to range such and such B4, that range there. Then wrong, that should be E5. Where am I? I think that's got to be B4 to E5 is there in fact. Okay, so I'm going to transfer them from here to here. Okay, and that range now is D4 to E5. Okay, now it's quite extraordinary. Look at that value. You're taking all the values in this and then placing them into here. I find it a little unusual for a start that it shouldn't, it's not values, but it is. We're stuck with it. It's value. It takes all of those values there and plonks them into there. Now let's just see if it works. Indeed it does. So it places them all. Isn't that extraordinary? You can take a whole spreadsheet full of stuff just with that property value and transfer it from one spreadsheet to another. You can find this very useful in practice when you're trying to transfer between one sheet and another data. If you were to do that, you have to fully specify the worksheet as well, but we'll come to that. It might be interesting to make a macro to do the same thing. So if we go to our macro recorder up here, top left, record a macro, macro 2. We don't really need a control key, I just want to look at the code really. So I'll just say OK and then start recording. So what I'll do, I'll take this code and copy it and then just paste it here, and then I'll stop the macro and then go and take a look at the macro code. Well, if I were to go into View Project Explorer, so I need to go to try and find it, and then I can see it here. It's in module 1, which has just been created. You know that every time I make a new macro, it records a module. If I make another macro in the same session, it would go into that module. If I made a macro in another session, it would create another module. Anyway, double click and there we are. There's our code. You see it says range A2 3 select, which is that particular rectangular range. Copy it, and then I only need to take one particular cell to paste it into, which is sort of very convenient actually, because if you were writing code, let me just click into the spreadsheet and I'll just press that annoying me. I'll just get rid of that escape key to turn that off. And if you were copy and pasting, it can be a bit of a nuisance to know how big the range is going. You have to specify the destination range. Well, here you don't, you see. So here's an advantage of trying to use the macro recorder. It does give you some hints sometime. There is another reason why you might want to do a copy and paste. I usually don't fancy it because you see lots of code and you see lots and lots of copies and pastes. People have been recording macros all over the place, but it certainly does have its place. Now, if you do a selection copy, can you think of another reason why you might want to do a copy and paste rather than just a values that we used before? Well, if you were to have it were to be formatted, say it's all red or something rather, and you want to preserve the formats, then when you run your macro, you'll find that it preserves the format. Indeed, if I were to try that, let's give that a go. I can run the macro from here. If I click in here, and then click my run button. It makes me a bit nervous sometimes doing that, but it seems to be okay for here. So if I click in here, the reason it makes me nervous is because you're not quite sure what sheet you're on sometimes, but that should work. If I click in here near the sub just here, and then I run my macro, you see now it actually preserves the formatting as well, which could be useful. I'd like to talk about the current region. Let's say that we indeed had this here, and if I were to press Control Shift and asterisk, then it selects that current region, the region that's being used, I guess. We've got bounded by like a garden path, if you like. If I have to do the same thing from code, well, let me see where I am. I was in sheet 1. There we go. And if I just replace that with current region select, so range B1 you could consider to be like a seed, so that any cell you like you could choose in here, and then click the button and it will select the current region around that particular cell. Let's see how we might use this. I'll just delete those values and try these particular values. What I'd like to do is to make all the blue one, all the numeric values blue. I want to iterate through that range, so what I'll do, I'll just declare a range variable, and then I'll set it equal to the current region. So B1, which is this cell here, the current region, it should show these up. Well, maybe I could just check it out first of all, and then just run that and just see if it does select all those. So yes, I'm on the right track. I'd like to use a for each loop like I did before, and remember I used a range CL as a range variable, and then I'd like to do a for each. So after setting my region, I'm going to use for each in here. So for each CL in range, in the range that we're talking about, and before I forget, I'll put a for each and then a next CL. Well, indeed, we're looking at throughout the whole range, so we could just qualify that with the cells which are contained within that particular range. So if I just give that a click, you see it just to make sure it's working and there are no errors kicking out. So what am I trying to do? For everything that's numeric in there, I want to make it blue. So this is, I might just indent this and then indent this as well, so it's readable. So you see, if it is numeric, the value that we've got, then it will make its font color blue. Okay, I'll just see if that works for starters. So click the button, and indeed they go blue. So I'll just get rid of the formatting on those as well. But what if now somebody wanted to add to this, if they wanted to add some extra data, and we wanted to make not only those numeric but this one as well. So this might work. You see, we've got the current region so far is B1, which is here, and the current region should be there now, so it will automatically include those values, hopefully, so it should make those ones blue as well. So if I click my button, indeed it does make those extra ones. So that is a sort of a reason for that you might want to use current region, where the user might want to extend his range of interest. I remember once doing this, and it seemed to be, without even running the code, it seemed to be extending. If I had some text here and some numbers here, then yeah, it doesn't work there. But in Excel, has got a feature which is called extend list, and will start doing it automatically. It picks up the pattern that you're using. Extend list data range, it's called. So just be aware of that, really. In the next video, we'll be talking further about range properties and methods.